Breaking news. President Trump just announced he's taking an alternative approach to pursuing his tariff agenda after the Supreme Court handed his administration a major defeat. So moments ago, the president posted to Truth Social this, writing in part, quote, "It is my great honor to have just signed from the Oval Office a global 10% tariff on all countries, which will be effective almost immediately." The Supreme Court today struck down Trump's sweeping tariffs. Now, earlier today, the president slammed that decision.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
President Trump announced global tariffs last April on what he called Liberation Day. He imposed duties on nearly every country in the world, including some of our largest trading partners. So here we go. And today, in a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court ruled against President Trump's sweeping tariff agenda, writing that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. The majority opinion included 2 of the 3 justices Trump appointed, Justices Gorsuch and Barrett. Only Justices Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas dissented. So I want to bring in CBS News reporter Erica Brown for more on this. So Erica, tell us more about the president's new announcement.
Well, that's right, Juliet. And as you noted there, the breaking news, the president signing an order to impose a 10% global tariff on all of the U.S.'s trading partners. And he hinted at that earlier today, saying he would pursue an alternate path to continue his economic agenda. This would be under Section 122 of the Trade Act, which does give him the authority to impose those tariffs, albeit for a limited amount of time, for only 150 days. But earlier today, you could glean the president's disappointment in that Supreme Court ruling from his tone while in that briefing room speaking with reporters, as he lashed out against the Supreme Court justices who ruled against his key economic agenda, that key tariff policy that has also been used as a bargaining chip and a key negotiating tool with U.S. trading partners. And the president called the justices that ruled against his tariff policy disloyal, unpatriotic, a disgrace to our nation, and it did not spare the conservative justices who sided with liberals on this issue, including, as you noted there, the 2 justices that the president nominated to the High Court, Justice Barrett and Justice Gorsuch. But the president also went on to target the plaintiffs in this case, calling them sleazebags. And one of those plaintiffs, the CEO of the learning company, it's an educational learning center, an educational toy company based in Illinois, reacted to this ruling, saying he felt vindicated because the Supreme Court sided with them and, in his view, struck down an unlawful tax that would have devastated his business. But the president in the White House briefing room today, very disappointed in this ruling, and the majority opinion essentially saying, look, these are powers that are reserved for Congress. You can't invoke that 1977 emergency powers law to impose sweeping global tariffs. And a quote from that majority opinion from Chief Justice John Roberts, he says the framers did not vest any of the taxing power in the executive branch. Juliet.
So what does this ruling mean for the use of presidential power?
Well, Julia, this certainly puts some guardrails on it, particularly when it comes to imposing sweeping tariffs, which, as I noted, was a key strategy for the president, a key bargaining chip with trade partners to get better trade deals. The president had called the trade deficit between the U.S. and global partners a national emergency. But this ruling does put some guardrails, some limitations on the president's powers, particularly when it comes to invoking that emergency powers law. And during the hearings, the justices had raised some questions as those arguments were being presented about whether or not that emergency powers law constituted tariffs, whether or not that was the intention of that law. Now, take a listen to what the president had to say about the guardrails and also about some alternate paths where he could still pursue his economic agenda.
Can't charge $1 to any country under IEEPA. Not $1. I assume to protect other countries. This must have been done to protect those other countries, certainly not the United States of America, which they should be interested in protecting. That's what they're supposed to be protecting. But I am allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with that same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade. I can destroy the country. I'm even allowed to impose a foreign country destroying embargo. I can embargo. I can do anything I want, but I can't charge $1.
And of course, this now comes as the president signed that order imposing a new 10% global tariff on all countries as a part of Section 122 of the Trade Act, which does grant the president authority to do so, although this has not been used before. And it does have some constraints. The president could only impose these tariffs for a period of 150 days. Julia?
Erica Brown. Erica, thank you. Let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. So, Jessica, Trump just announced he's imposing a 10% global tariff. Earlier today, he said he would do it under a different trade authority. It's called Section 122. Explain that provision, and does the president need congressional approval to impose that tariff?
So I think Erica laid this out really well. So we're talking about the Trade Act of 1974. We're talking about a specific provision, Section 122, and it essentially allows the president, if there is a trade deficit, to say that he's going to impose tariffs. The issue here is that those tariffs can only exist for 150 days unless there's congressional approval. I'm just going to add to the already great conversation here that I think what we're seeing is there absolutely are other avenues for the president to act. There are other statutes that more cleanly give him the power to impose tariffs. But with respect to all of those statutes, there's either more requirements on the front end, more procedural hurdles, and or they're more limited. They wouldn't allow the president to accomplish the same thing that he wants to do with those broad, sweeping tariffs that didn't have any time limit. And that's where you see with Section 122, it's 150 days unless Congress says, yes, we're giving the thumbs up, this can go longer.
So American importers have paid tens of billions of dollars in customs duties because of the president's tariffs. And then the president today was really not specific about whether businesses will get refunds. So how do you expect that to play out?
So I think it's going to be administratively difficult, to say the least. This will go back to the International Trade Court in the first instance, and many people and many mom and pop businesses and big box businesses will go to the International Trade Court and say, I paid taxes, or excuse me, I paid this tariff, and it's just been declared illegal, not from here on forward, but from the get-go. And so I'm entitled to compensation. And that's going to take some time. It's not impossible, but I think that we could be looking at months, if not years, for people to recoup their losses.
Yeah, I was going to say there's definitely going to be a timeline. And can we even guesstimate the losses for a mom and pop shop?
So I think it completely depends on how much they buy from abroad, what they buy. I wouldn't want to guesstimate other than to say I think for some people this was hugely significant and affected their bottom line and frankly their ability to employ people, provide the goods and services that they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica Levinson. Jessica, thank you.